In pathogen group number 8, we're going to start with the poliomyelitis, or short polio viruses. These are single-stranded RNA viruses, no envelope. Most infections are confined to the lining of the digestive tract, but a few progress to paralytic infection of the central nervous system. The transmission is on the fecal-oral route. It used to be a very dreaded disease at some point, and a lot of parents were really worried that their child would end up getting polio because it can result in flaccid paralysis. That means you're using the function of that part of the body. It's now rare because of a very successful vaccination program. There are two types of vaccines: the Salk IPV, inactivated polio vaccine that uses the killed virus, and the Sabine OPV, the oral polio vaccine, and that one uses live modified virus. Here's an image of the polio virus. You can see the RNA core, that's the genetic material, and then the capsid on the outside. And here will be a diagram showing the movement of the virus from the digestive tract to the central nervous system. So it is ingested, let's see, some fluid, and goes through the digestive tract and leaves the digestive tract and then infects the central nervous system, where it can destroy motor neurons, for example. So here would be an image showing polio damaged muscle. You can see how this muscle here, this calf muscle, is much smaller. On this leg, the muscles are generally much smaller than in this leg right here, and that is because these motor neurons no longer stimulate the muscle, and then the muscle gets weak and it ends up in paralysis. Here's the decline of polio between 1937 and 2011. You can see here a spike in cases in the 1950s, early ones. And then 1955, the polio vaccine became available. It was introduced in 1955, and there were 28,985 cases that year, but then after that a sharp decline, and it's been down ever since. And this vaccination is just very successful. Moving on to arthropod-borne encephalitis viruses. They are abbreviated as arboviruses, which comes from so arthropod-borne encephalitis viruses. These are single-stranded RNA viruses with an envelope. There are many types. They're transmitted by Culex species of mosquitoes and other mosquitoes. Reservoirs include birds and horses, and most people don't actually experience severe disease, but the ones that do, they experience a sudden onset of high fever, headache, sensory changes, vomiting, paralysis, convulsions, stupor, disorientation, coma, and but again, most infections are asymptomatic, but then they can progress into encephalitis, and that would be bad. Greatest risk to infants that don't have a strong immune system just yet. Vector control is a good way to try to keep the mosquito population that transmits the arboviruses, to keep those down. There's also a vaccine available for high-risk individuals. And so here are some of the encephalitis viruses. The classic ones would include the Western equine encephalitis viruses and then the Eastern equine encephalitis viruses. They abbreviate EEE or WEE, and you can see so roughly the geographical distribution of these encephalitis viruses. Wetland birds are common reservoirs for these viruses, and here would be an image showing you the encephalitis hosts. Of course, pay attention here to mosquitoes here and here. They sucking blood from various animals, and then the accidental host, the humans, they could transmit then the virus to a human, and then cause problems. Here is a diagram showing the encephalitis tissue damage by the immune process. So basically, starting right here, the virus is in blood vessels, and then here the virus is leaving the blood vessels. It could infect the neural tissue, cause problems there, or it could infect white blood cells, and they could release cytokines that could then cause inflammatory processes. So there's a variety of a number of things that can happen. Also, your immune system usually makes antibodies, and then they can actually cause even also problems as well. Moving on to West Nile virus, which is one of those arboviruses, just one of those that were emerging not too long ago. And so the West Nile virus here is a mosquito-borne RNA virus. It's in the family of the Flaviviridae, just like the other ones, so related to dengue virus and yellow fever virus. Here's the West Nile virus transmission cycle, and there we have the mosquito as a vector, as usual, and birds are reservoirs and hosts for this virus. But once the mosquito sucks here blood from a bird, and then the accidental host would be a human right here. So you have an incidental infection, also incidental infection on horses, and that can be as well. So here you can see that the human would be the accidental host, getting bit by this mosquito vector, and then getting the West Nile virus inside. Most people will be having either mild symptoms or no symptoms at all, but then there are some that are coming down with severe symptoms up to encephalitis. So here are some West Nile virus facts on the symptoms. So mild symptoms. So 80% of people infected have no symptoms at all. 20% have mild symptoms, and those include the ones listed right here. Serious symptoms would be seen in less than 1% of people, and very characteristic would be a very high fever and a massive headache. Those are signs of impending encephalitis. And here the West Nile virus presence in the United States in 2015. You can see it's not an awful lot of cases, but it is a reportable disease, and so the CDC keeps tabs on those case numbers. But right now, of course, nobody's really worried about West Nile. Another emerging virus a couple of years ago was Zika virus, and again, because of coronavirus, nobody's really worried about Zika virus right now. So here we have the family of the Flaviviridae again. Genetic material would be genomic RNA, and this virus also in most people doesn't cause a whole lot of problems, but it can lead to something called microcephaly, an abnormally small head in infants. So if a mother is infected with Zika virus during pregnancy, especially early on in the first trimester, it can cause severe neurological problems that are visible at birth, and it leads to an abnormally small head. So you can see the normal head circumference should be something like this, and this kid has an abnormally small head. And so here also you can see severely small the head region right here. Here the flavivirus life cycle is pretty generic. You're starting out with virus attachment and entry into a host cell, and then the virus fusion and disassembly happens. Then the virus will instruct the host cell to make more viral particles, which need to be assembled, and then it leads to virus maturation, and then the virus will bud off the host cell and leave the host cell, infect more tissues. Prevention, symptoms, and other information here on this chart. Be careful during pregnancy. That is, it's the problems here with the Zika virus. The microcephalus, that's just something that's not reversible during pregnancy. Now, most women, or most people in general, don't experience a whole lot of symptoms with this virus, but some do. And again, during pregnancy, this can be very bad. So you can read through those symptoms here. A lot of people experience fatigue. They may have muscle pain. Some have diarrhea. Those are the more common symptoms. Severe headache is usually also part of it. Countries with confirmed Zika cases. You can see on this chart right here. But again, there aren't a lot of cases right now, and nobody's really worried about it because we have a bigger problem at hand right now. So here you can see the case numbers. You might laugh about it because right now we're dealing with so many coronavirus cases, and it makes these numbers here look like a joke almost. Moving on to common cold viruses. There are a lot of viruses, over 200 of them, and that's why we will probably never be done with having colds. So if you think, oh, I got a cold and now I will be immune to colds, that's not true, because there are hundreds of cold-causing viruses around, and chances are every time you're going to catch a different one and have another cold. The virus families that are causing colds are the rhinoviruses, paramyxoviruses, enteroviruses, and here we are, our old friend, the coronaviruses. Reoviruses and adenoviruses also can cause cold. Most common transmission would be the virus is someone on your hands, your fingers, then you touch your face with those fingers, and you get the virus into the eye, nose, mouth. All of these are portals of entry, and there you go, the virus is in, and then you get your cold. Of course, you can also catch the virus via airborne droplets, somebody sneezing on you, and that's how you get the virus. Always keep your social distance if you don't want to get a cold. It's always a good idea, because these airborne droplets, they can reach somewhere between 3 to 6 feet. So 6 feet is pretty safe social distance. If you have the common cold, you typically have no fever, or if you have, it will be a mild fever. The duration is about a week. So sort of the rule of thumb is it takes 3 days to really fully develop. 3 days it will stay with you, and 3 days it will take to recover. And so then you're pretty much done after about a week. A lot of times people end up with bacterial secondary infections. That would be a lot of times Pseudomonas, like green snot, or you have a productive cough or something like that. So these are secondary infections that are usually caused by bacteria. So here is a rhinovirus, an image. It kind of reminds us to that coronavirus, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. Here, progression of a cold. So first you get infected, and here's this person getting infected. The virus will invade mucosal tissue. Then there's the progression of the cold. And so the virus infects the nasal epithelium. The virus here, it's in the nasal epithelium, starts to multiply, instruct the host cells to make more viral particles. Then it will burst out of these nasal epithelial cells, destroying many of them. You can see some destroyed cells, and the viral particles will get out, millions of them. You start sneezing, and you might spread the viral particles that way. And your host defenses will kick in, of course. Phagocytic cells, they will try to eat up those virus-infected cells. And then you might also have bacterial cells that are coming in as opportunistic pathogens, causing a secondary infection. And meanwhile, you're not feeling too good, and you start sneezing because the nasal epithelium is all itchy, and you're going to sneeze out a lot of those virus particles. And eventually your antibodies will be ready, and you will also, your cells that will make some interferon warning neighboring cells to guard themselves from viral infection. And you will end up recovering, your epithelium will regrow, and you'll be done with that cold. Now, since we are dealing with a pandemic caused by coronaviruses, let me just say a little bit about coronaviruses now, and we will add coronaviruses as a pathogen on our pathogen sheets. It can easily be one of those pathogens that will be on the pathogen test, hint, hint. And so here, coronaviruses, it's a family of viruses, and they can cause respiratory illnesses such as the common cold. So it can cause just a common cold, but then they also can cause severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS, or Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome, MERS. And so here I have SARS and MERS. Both of them are closely related to the COVID-19 that we're dealing with right now. They're all in the family of the coronaviruses, but COVID-19 can cause severe problems in quite a few people, actually. So the disease name for your pathogen sheet would be